Go into the background for us because I was talking to some folks at HBCU, Historically Black Colleges and University, and I mentioned Space Force, and they said, "Oh, what company is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, we need to work on that." So by all means, fill us in on the background as much as you can.
Absolutely. You bet. So my personal background, so I started my career as an Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps graduate in 2005. And my assignments over my career have actually been pretty varied. I haven't had the standard career that one would normally think of. I actually started in nuclear operations. And back then, nuclear and space operations were all housed in the same AFSC or MOS. And so just as I was leaving my first tour, space and nuclear operations were splitting into two separate AFSCs. And we got to choose which direction that we wanted to go. And obviously, I chose space. And so from there, I had the opportunity to work in several space operations centers with several different types of mission systems. And as my career progressed, I was able to work on various staff positions and gain unique executive staff or program management experience. And so at one point in my career, though, I was able to be a professor at the US Air Force Academy. And from there, I received the unique opportunity to go to the University of Oxford to work on my PhD. And so that was a very unique experience for someone like me who grew up in a very small farming community in Missouri. And I never thought that those types of opportunities would be available to me, but my military service has given me opportunities that I could have never even dreamt of as a younger person. And so I went to Oxford. I was there for 3 years. I studied experimental psychology. And my thesis, as we've discussed in the past, dealt with human decision-making when paired with algorithmic sources of information. And so to give an example, that's such as when you are using your GPS to navigate, or you have an automated shopper, or you're using image recognition. And what my research looks at is how humans pair with those types of algorithmic systems in a human-machine team. And so from those research experiences and that really enriching experience of living overseas and being in that environment, that's what then drove me back to what was then Air Force Space Command to work with Dr. Mosier and his team.
I want to do a quick follow-up there because you said something there that made me think about the way the Guardians are going to be receiving training. So obviously, your recruiting command, you're looking for enlisted ranks for Space Force. And so when we talk about, the unique training and education that you've received, and I think about how the space economy is going to grow, we're around 400 billion today. Estimates put that at, 10 or 20 times that in the decades ahead. What sort of training are folks going to get being recruited by Space Force and being members of Space Force that they can then apply to the space economy, both through their military career, but then maybe after in civilian roles?
That is a really deep and insightful question, George, that I think you could probably devote an entire segment to that question, because as you know, the space economy is an absolute growth industry. And when I last looked at some of the reports from the Space Foundation, the space economy was steadily encroaching on the $500 billion mark. And most reports I've seen predict that the space economy will continue to grow at an increasing rate. Therefore, now building from your question, if a person hypothetically were to join and get out in the 5 to 10 year time frame, it's my opinion that they would have absolutely no problem finding a job in the space sector, should they decide to stay in that line of work. And it's also my opinion that finding prior service guardians will be a top priority for commercial space recruiters in the future, if that's not already the case. So the revolving door has always been an expected issue for military services. And what that means is that it's expected that not everyone will serve 20 or 30 years, but they might choose to serve shorter periods of time before getting out and finding civilian employment. So again, this is why recruiting is an absolutely critical military function.
It makes me think about too, and you talked about recruiting. I know we're talking about enlisted recruiting and how that applies to them building job skills. I myself, I served a few of my years in the reserves for the Marine Corps. Is there a reserve recruitment going on right now, or is that something still being talked about? What's that look like? 'Cause that's sort of the hybrid between people who serve and people who still live and work in their communities.
Yes, that's right. And currently, those discussions are well above my level. So unfortunately, I'm not able to speak to that topic. But I can tell you from the Air Force side that there is still an Air Force Reserve recruiting function, and that's still alive and well and a very important part of our total force.